The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
We need a president who respects science, who understands that the damage from climate change is already here.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbonista.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista, Series 2, The Manifesto. I'm Ian Collins. Once again, we fire up the news database and go searching for all of those stories around the green agenda, the stories that our politicians are meant to be looking after, but rather frighteningly tend to leave alone. Our man with the raised eyebrows on this and with a dogged determination is Dale Vince, the entrepreneur and environmentalist. Morning to you, Dale.
Yeah, morning, Ian. How's things?
It's good, yeah. And actually, I was quite looking forward to this first story because we have touched on it before and there was some mood music around this week. And lots of concerns, certainly my listeners to the radio show were calling in saying, well, how do I replace my boiler? Do I have to do it? Will I get a knock on the door from the boys or the men in black if I don't? No gas boilers to be sold past 2025 if we want to go net zero by 2050 is the headline here.
Yeah, this is a report from the IEA. I think they've made 400 recommendations, or maybe it's 40. I might be exaggerating today. But they've looked at the world of energy and what we need to do to get to net zero. They've looked at the growing gulf between the promises of politicians and the actual policies. Yeah, and one of them that got highlighted by the Beeb this week was a ban on new gas boilers. And,
yeah,
you know, I think it's, arguably it's right, but arguably it's wrong because we've been saying for a long time, you know, we don't actually have to give up gas to heat our homes. And it's one of the most intractable problems, often described as decarbonizing the heat sector, which is, gloriously impenetrable language. But it's basically how do we stop using fossil gas? And we don't actually have to stop using gas per se because we can make renewable gas like we make renewable electricity. And we've been pushing this for a while. When I recently met the Environment Secretary at one of our wind farms, I then sent him our gas report. I mean, there's enough marginal grassland in Britain to grow enough grass to make enough gas to power all 30-odd million homes, or nearly 30 million British homes. And, it's a fabulous opportunity to create 70,000 jobs in the rural economy and save the burning of £7 billion worth of gas, which is increasingly mostly imported these days and that kind of stuff. And of course, fight the climate crisis and that kind of stuff. And it's going to be more economic that way than to replace gas boilers, because banning the sale of new ones is one thing, but that's the tip of the iceberg. It's the installed fleet of boilers that's the really big problem, and we need an answer for that. And the answer, I don't think, is heat pumps. I think it's part of the answer, but the answer is actually let's make green gas.
Yeah. And what about this hydrogen? Again, this came up with cars the other day. The hydrogen theory that we can change it to one thing, and then these new changes will be, as somebody described it to me, the Betamax of boilers. And then in a few years' time, we'll change them to something else.
Well, I mean, that could happen. But right now, since the 90s, all new gas appliances have been able to use about 20% hydrogen. And there's a wonderful opportunity here for us. People talk about putting hydrogen into the gas grid. And I think doing it pure has problems. That's not the answer. But putting up to 20% into the gas grid definitely is an answer, because it links really neatly into the fact that we've got to oversize the generation fleet for electricity to make sure we've always got some. And there will be times, therefore, when we have much too much. We can turn that into hydrogen. We can store it or use it in the gas grid, or both.
Sure.
And it becomes like a giant battery in effect. And, because gas boilers since the 90s have been able to do this, it means pretty much everybody's gas boiler can do it, which is a fantastic opportunity. So as always, the answer is a kind of hybrid of lots of things: green gas, hydrogen, taking advantage of the need to oversize the generation fleet in power. And we get to a kind of neat joined up solution.
Got it. Is there a kind of, as far as you know, a kind of an Apple of the boiler world out there that somebody could go, right, that's the one, that bit of kit will tick every single box? Do they? Is that on the market right now?
I think we've got the boilers that we need, actually.
Good.
And they've been here since the 90s. Hello.
Yeah, fantastic.
We just got to make use of them and build a generation fleet, create that hydrogen from excess renewable electricity, and
Yeah.
start putting it in the gas grid to displace fossil gas, and start building gas mills to make gas from grass. We're building our first one in the next 12 months at Reading. It'll be the first one in Britain to make gas using grass, and it's a solution that's here, just waiting for us. It's so brutally simple, and I think that's why it's being overlooked by politicians. Let's grow some grass and turn it into gas.
Yeah, there it is. Here's a question from David Parker. What do you think about an independent Scotland as part of the UK's renewable energy strategy? Given they are going to be Boris's Saudi Arabia of wind, will that help the financial gap when North Sea oil ends?
Oh, here we go again. Boris Johnson didn't come up with the Saudi Arabia of wind. He just purloined it. It's been around for like a couple of decades. We've been using it. We used it last century, actually.
You're saying he nicked
time. Absolutely.
Plagiarized somebody else's idea.
And, what it's based on is the fact that Britain has 40% of Europe's wind. So we're like the Saudi Arabia of wind, and that's fine. Scottish independence, I think it might happen. I don't think it's got anything to do with the UK's renewable energy strategy. And if anything, it might make it a little bit more tricky.
Sure.
But who knows? But, I don't understand how people like Johnson can argue that Scotland should stay in the UK, having successfully argued that the UK should leave Europe for pretty much all the same reasons. I think it's the most incredible double standard.
Yeah. Although you could say, well, is Scotland doing the same thing? They don't want to listen to what goes on down in Westminster, but we'll listen to what happens over there in Brussels instead.
Well, why can't they choose? They may prefer the bureaucrats in Brussels, I certainly do, to the ones in London.
Oh, they're great down in London. If you're not seeing, there's Boris, there's Gove, Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, they're
it's
a
the roll
comedy
call
show.
of brilliance.
It is, yeah. I mean, that's fair, actually. I think we're led by geniuses.
Yeah. Here's a great story. Well, I say it's a terrible story, but it's just one of those, you couldn't make this up. Brazil's environment minister, is being investigated for timber trafficking. That's not a good look.
What I loved about that story is the fact that there is a term, timber trafficking.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it jumps out at me too.
I think that's brilliant. But yeah, look, I mean, it's been going on a long time. Politicians are corrupt. Timber is being trafficked. The Amazon is being destroyed. File it into the category of what's really new here.
Yeah. They call it as well because the Justice Minister said that the federal police had all the evidence that the minister and other environmental officials were involved in, quote, extremely serious scheme to facilitate the contraband of rainforest products.
And over here, we just have the massive fraud of the handing out of billions of pounds of public money to the chums of the Tory party and the government for PPE contracts.
Yes, a lot went there, wasn't there? Which I think this week was ruled we don't have to find out where it all went.
Oh, wow.
So that just makes it a bad situation just a whole lot worse.
I think some of it was used to refurbish the flat in number 11, wasn't it?
The wallpaper. Yeah. The wallpaper. Alex on Twitter, what's happened to the Sky Diamonds? Can I buy one anywhere?
Not yet, Alex, but soon. I hope by the summer. So we're close to being in production. Still slightly hampered by lockdown. We needed some key parts from Italy and stuff like that, but we're virtually there now. And we had a big breakthrough this week. Actually, we produced a stone of the color E. Anybody who knows about diamonds will know that color grading of diamonds starts at D. Typically, lab-grown stones are in the range of kind of F, G, H, and that actually represents 1% of all mined stones in terms of quality. So it's right at the top end, but we hit E for the first time this week, and I have a feeling we might even get to D, which would be exceptional.
And in terms of that kind of market, is that going to take over the Sky Diamond? I mean, will there be a point when we go, actually, this is the only way we now get diamonds?
Well, we hope so. When we launched it in November, we did it with a call to end diamond mining, because huge holes are being dug in the ground. 1,100 tons of rock are dug for a fifth of a gram of diamond, which is incredible. There are 3 tons of toxic metals displaced in the process, half a ton of greenhouse gases. I mean, the environment impact is hideous. Don't even get to the social impact, and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like fossil fuels, actually, diamonds. We should leave them in the ground, and we don't need to dig anymore for them because we can make them from excess carbon dioxide, which is quite brilliant, I have to say, because we have too much of that stuff, and we can use it to make something that we quite like to have. Diamonds, why not? But we need to end diamond mining in the same way that we need to end the burning of fossil fuels and the farming of animals.
When was the last time you went on an aeroplane, Dale?
I can't remember, but I think it was to New York a few years ago to a climate event.
And since then, you've kind of had your own sort of almost moratorium on this, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, I agonized over that, but I went to take part in something. But yeah, not since. Last time I did some UN stuff. Luckily, it was in Europe, so it was easy-ish. A quarter train, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm not a fan of flying.
The reason I ask is because the EU, the kind of top officials on climate change, have now backed the German Green Party's call for tax and pricing changes to make rail travel more popular than flying. I mean, obviously this works to an extent, or addresses the problem to an extent. I mean, if you're us in the UK, an island nation, and you want to go to Spain, you can't do that on a train.
No, but you
can in part.
Yeah, you can in part, or you can catch a ferry. There's a 24-hour ferry from the south of England to Santander. I did it in my old fire engine decades ago. This is not rocket science, but it's quite brilliant to see it coming up, in, let's call it mainstream politics. The idea that we should make the right way of doing things cheaper and the wrong way of doing things more expensive. It's in my manifesto. We have to use taxes and subsidies to create a better outcome. And the idea that you can fly across Europe for 30 quid is quite frankly bonkers, or that any plane journey should be cheaper than a train journey is crazy. These are perverse economics, and we need to correct that. And so I say fair play to the German Greens, and it looks like they're getting traction with the idea. France recently banned 2.5-hour flights, internal flights, because they can be done by a train. And again, another great step in the right direction. We just got to end the madness of this.
But that would ultimately involve, one has to reasonably assume, the falling of many airline companies.
Well, I mean, it has to, I guess, because it has to involve the reduction of flying, particularly these short internal domestic flights where there's a very viable alternative, but we have to make adjustments. I mean, it's the same if we stop animal farming, farmers are going to need other jobs. That's fine, because they will exist. And when we stop the burning of fossil fuels, we create jobs instead in renewable energy. We just got to transition. This is a new industrial revolution. We just got to replace the old jobs and the old way of doing things with the new.
Here's one from Jamesy on Twitter. Have you started your new book yet, Dale? Wow.
No, I don't have a new book in the pipe. And not enough has happened since last June when I wrote the first one.
Maybe there's a novel there. Kind of you sort of take up the next sort of Agatha Christie type vibe, the whodunit, but all based around sort of green issues.
Yeah, I'm not getting it. Not feeling that.
I think there's endless amounts of material there when it comes to who done it and who screwed up the environment. I mean, there'd be never-ending source.
Yeah, that'd be a war and peace, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Who done it? Most politicians, that's who did it.
Yeah. There was another story, you haven't touched upon it yet, but also coming out of the IEA report was the statement by them that we have to simply stop building new forms of power generation from fossil fuels. Right now, this year, we should never build another one, and stop mining basically for fossil fuels. And on the subject of who done it, you look at what our government are doing. They've got the biggest rhetoric on climate targets, and yet they're just licensing more exploration of the North Sea for fossil fuels. And somebody in my inbox today tells me there's a gas-fired power station just being consented in Somerset at Axbridge, has been consented, which is madness. And we're going to see if we can, help them out with that, maybe some kind of legal challenge. But, our government are saying all the right things, doing all the wrong things. And the IEA are calling this out and saying, look, it has to end. They're also saying we have to double the spending on energy globally, and it's going to create millions of jobs. It'll be a huge economic boost. So the idea that this green transition is going to be bad for us is nonsense now. All the big players, the economists, the energy experts, everybody says that's not the case. It's the other way around.
Who listens? I mean, what sort of teeth do the IEA have? Because I've often wondered this, and we touch on a lot of stories where they've advised or given their views on something or their advice on something. And as you rightly say, if you visited this planet from another solar system and came down, you'd think we'd all gone bonkers, because you're right. You have the government making all the right noises, the public statements, very encouraging. And then you have the IEA, the International Energy Agency, making their pronouncements. And it all says, oh, this all makes sense. And then while this is happening, some arse clown around the corner is building a coal mine. And you think, hang on a sec. How is this happening? It's a complete contradiction of not only the advice, but of your own words.
Yeah, I think the problem we have is politics, isn't it? It's disassociated from reality, and the claims and words of politicians are equally disassociated from their actions. They say one thing, do another, and we seem to have tolerated that for a long time. It's just become a thing, and we don't worry about it. Like Trump telling a lie, be like, yeah, there's no news in that, and we have to change that. Actually, in the IEA, I mean, they're the grown-ups in the conversation, and they're pointing out the technical, the economic realities, and they're positive for us. But they're also pointing out the gap between the increasing number of countries with high carbon reduction targets and exactly on the right track, but the gap between that and what they're actually doing, which is stark at the moment.
Yeah. Here's a confusing one. Your club, Forest Green Rovers, have got a new kit, and the headlines, there's a lot of headlines around this, that it's made entirely of pixels.
Yeah.
What even is that, Dale?
I love it. So digital fashion is a thing, a fairly recent thing. We talked about it on this podcast, I think, recently. We were swooning over some Gucci sneakers, or I was.
Right, yeah.
And I can't actually buy them because they don't exist in the real world, but they're just digital clothing. And that's becoming a thing where people are buying clothes that aren't real. They're not made of material. They don't get shipped to you. You don't hang them in your actual wardrobe, and you can't wear them. But you can dress yourself in digital clothes and use those images on social media, which is where people are increasingly living. So I think it's a great idea. And as a club, we've been pursuing low impact material for our shirts for quite a while. 2 years ago, we introduced bamboo, which is a great material. This year, we've introduced coffee grounds, which goes one stage further because it's a recycled material, and it actually performs better as well athletically. So that's a good thing.
Sure.
And at the same time, we thought, let's get to the logical end game. The lowest impact form of clothing that I can imagine anyway is a form of clothing that doesn't exist in the real world.
Yep.
It's made of pixels. And so we've launched it yesterday. It's a world first for a football club. And for 2 months, you'll be able to get the digital version before the real version enters the world.
So you can actually kind of tog yourself up in that kit digitally.
Yeah, you send a picture in, and either a top half if you want just a shirt, or a full picture if you want the whole kit. And our digital outfitters will fit you with the kit and send it back to you, and away you go.
The Digitailer. I like it. I wonder where he is in your building. Somewhere. And a final one from Pete on Facebook, who says, Jeremy Clarkson now says he recognizes climate change. Who else would you like to change their mind?
That's a good question, actually. And I'm going to say Trump, because obviously he's an idiot, and obviously he's a liar, and all that kind of stuff. But he's equally obviously got this enormous following in America. And if Trump got climate change, then he could literally change the political climate around the issue big time.
There was a story this morning that he's thinking of standing again in 2024.
Does he not stand very often?
Yeah, at the moment. I think he's fully horizontal. Would he? And it's interesting because when you look at what the Republicans are doing, they're kind of eating themselves alive at the moment. I know all parties go through this. At the moment over here, we've got the Labour Party who can't get their act together. But over there, certainly they don't know what's happening. Would Trump adopting a more green approach be the answer? Because you can see some Republicans discombobulating, but those that sat on the fence might go, right, this is a new Trump now. So he would still bring those Republicans with him, but he might get those wavering voters too. Because, I mean, this is a guy that's still got 70 million votes, remember?
Yeah, I know. It's madness. It's madness. Yeah, I have no idea what it might do to the outcome of the election, but I think what it would take away is a massive distraction from the science, from the settled nature of what it is that we need to do, and it would take away something that so many people could point to and say, yes, but Donald Trump says this, that, or whatever. It would just it would kill the other half of the narrative, really. And but then again, if it got him elected, that would be a bad thing. So maybe I'm just gonna change my view on that.
We'll watch with interest. Dale, we'll speak next week.
All right, and see you
Have
later.
a good week. That's it for this one. Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast from your podcast provider. That way you can get each new episode automatically. Do leave a review there as well. Really important that you follow Dale on social media, Twitter and Facebook, twitter.com/Dale Vince, facebook.com/Dale Vince, and you'll find Dale on LinkedIn too.
Zero Carbon
East Off.